Hello class, this is Mr. Broussard and I'm sending you this video for the second week of our July 2nd 4 weeks Composition 1 course, English 1114 for the summer of 2020. I wanted to give you all a heads up on what has been going on and what you need to do as far as this course. First things first, I've graded your first essays, and luckily for the very first essay I'm given the option of allowing you a redo. Which many of you need. Some of you don't. Some of you did really well and will want to keep the grade that you have. Although I will allow anyone to. The grades and what I saw in the first essay, mostly I could tell were issues of students not editing and proofreading their work. Most of the lost points were lost because there was no going over the essay after it was written. And something I've learned with students over my many years of teaching these courses is that while you have the ability to autopilot many areas of structure, of organization, and some of those parts of your rubric did show that as well. And even once you learn how to do a proper thesis statement, a proper thesis paragraph, that you're able to get that down. You can't autopilot grammar, spelling, punctuation, usage. You have to check it afterwards. You have to check it while you're doing it and then check it again afterwards, and if need be, check it again. I harp in my physical classes about revise, edit, proofread, revise, edit, proofread, revise, edit, proofread. Those were chapters in which you were supposed to read for last week's assignments. You may have read it, but you might not have done it for your own work, and the revision part might have been done. Generally, because the areas of revision, which is usually your structural stuff and your content stuff, is generally usually pretty good, either because you already have those natural skills or because you do the revision part afterwards. But students, I can beg and plead, for some reason will not do the editing and proofreading part. Cleaning up all the mistakes that you have, the little things here or there, can pile up into big things and ends up costing you a lot of points, especially in a course like this, because you may have noticed on your rubric. The rubric is broken up to 5 different areas for a traditional Comp 1 course: thesis, topic, organization, general grammar, spelling, punctuation, usage issues, general English grammar usage, and typographical issues. Now, just to let you know, on that last one, typographical, I basically use that as a means of counting off when you have a mistake, but not dinging you really hard for that mistake unless it is a fatal error. So if it's simple missing comma, that by being there is a regular error but not a fatal error, then you lose a point. And that's why it dings you 1, 2, 3, 4, because you have a total of 5 points that are on that rubric. On the 5th mistake of a general mistake, it resets fully to 5 points, but then you lose a level on the grammar, spelling, punctuation, usage, which is the part of the rubric that goes right above it. So 5 general errors will cause you to lose that. Now, you may have noticed that part of the rubric, you lose 7 points for every level that you lose. That's different from the rest of it, whereas in thesis, in topic, and organization, you only lose 4 points per level. Well, we need to overemphasize the areas of grammar, spelling, punctuation, usage in Comp 1 because those are the areas, the general areas of gravest concern when it comes to students who then move from a Comp 1 into other courses, and most importantly, because it is the stuff that will not be dealt with when you get to any level above a Composition 1 course. It will, in Composition 2, you deal with critical analysis, and then you move on to the deep depth of the literature itself in your sophomore level classes and beyond. So it ends up being a major factor of this class because it's assumed you know it. There's certain bits and pieces of it that are assumed you know it when you come into this course. And through various reasons, either not learning in the first place, not having it emphasized at all, or having been, some time since you last went over some of those things, you might not have the information as it's needed when you're writing it, or the main reason most of these things happen, quite frankly, is students waiting till the last minute to write their stuff and not giving themselves enough time to do the proper edit, revision, and proofread, in particular editing and proofreading afterwards. I know that for a fact because I get to see the exact time in which y'all turn in these essays, and that told me all I needed to know, that there was not, and then of course the mistakes themselves, that there were these issues, and therefore that's why a lot of points were lost. If you lose every available point on the grammar, spelling, punctuation, usage, and typographical levels, the best grade you can earn on that composition is a 68. That's a high D. High D is the best grade you can get if you just leave that a mess. And it's bad enough when it's the little mistakes and you have so many little mistakes. Basically, you can make up to 24 of those little mistakes, and on that 24th one, you lose it all. However, and this is a big one, and I noted this on many of your comments boxes, if you have what's determined a fatal error, fatal errors don't take anything off of that lowest level. You immediately lose 7 points for every time a fatal error shows up. And I'm telling you right now, that's me being nice. Because in prior years and prior courses, and what I dealt with as a student, and what most university students deal with as students, or at least used to, maybe this has been eased there too. For what I know, they still emphasize these fatal errors. It can cost you even more points. And once you hit a sophomore level course, you have a fatal error, it's an automatic 0. And it doesn't matter how amazing the rest of the work is. It does not matter. Just one fatal error would cause your composition to be a 0. In semesters prior, I had it to where on the second one, it was a 0. And then I tried easing up a little more and saying, okay, 3 of the 4 would cost you 7 points per level, or 7 for the first 4, and then only 4 for the 5th, because they can't take any more points. The rubric won't let me. But then writing in the second person, which is one of the 4 fatal errors. And I noted this on way more of yours than I should have. This should have been learned by you a long time ago. If you're writing an essay composition, unless the part of the composition deals with anything that would be in quote marks, i.e. dialogue and a narrative work, so like the essay that's coming up for this week, which I'll later on, or the information isn't quote marked because it is directly source material, which you won't be dealing with, by the way, until the last of your essays, the argumentative essay in this course. There's only a few exceptions to this rule, but other than those exceptions, you are to never write an essay in any part, way, fame, fortune, other than those exceptions, in the second person, meaning the word you, your, yours, or any form of you should never appear on an essay unless it's one of the exceptions that has it being a part of quoted material, which you only deal with in a narrative if it's part of the dialogue. So like the narrative that's coming up this week that I'm going to tell you a little more about, if the character in the narrative says it, it's perfectly fine. The narrator themselves, as an outside narrator, or you as the writer yourself, basically any part of the essay that is not in the quote marks, if the word you appears anywhere in that essay, and again, this is me being nice now, you lose 7 points for the first 4 times it happens. And then the 5th time, I'm only allowed to take 4 points from you because the rubric won't let me take more points from you. That saves many students' work from being in the negatives. Like I've given negative grades before because of certain errors here, there, and everywhere where the rubric couldn't protect you. That's a combination of all the fatal errors, by the way. But prior to only a few years ago, if you had more than one you in any essay, I just placed a 0 on it and moved on to the next one. Again, this should be something you've known long before now. And unfortunately, what I have learned, and that's why I've actually had to ease off on the harshness of the penalties, is you're not being taught this. You were not taught this in K through 12. For a while there, I learned that you weren't being taught writing at all because they can't test the writing. You know, they can teach you to a test, but they can't teach you to writing because there's no writing portions on those tests. The only tests that they really care about in K through 12, and therefore they didn't bother with it. And only in the last couple of years have they tried to rectify that issue, mainly because what happened was a lot of colleges and universities, including our own, went almost exclusively to written-based work. You had to type essays or other compositions, and that was the only work you had. The easy Scantron test that used to be things that was always happening, in particular amongst tenured professors, that started going away because what we learned it was these students were, you know, through both the K through 12's failures and teaching you to test, but not you're not actually learning anything. Well, that was creeping its way into colleges, and so then the students were wondering which professors to take, generally the tenured ones who didn't care. who gave the easy Scantron test. So you already learned how to talk to a test, so they would continue to teach you to the test, and then students would pass those tests, bubble in the right bubbles, pass the courses, and eventually, yes, pass through college and earn, they would earn their high school diplomas and they'd earn their college degrees, and they had barely written anything. Even to the point where they could even get to grad school and learn how to work their way through that and not have to deal with it. We all realized that became an issue because about 5 years ago, we started issues with students all across the country who would, graduate, all the levels they graduated, and then get into the workforce, and they couldn't do any of the jobs that they were hired to do. They didn't know anything about the actual material because they just studied the test and didn't actually learn the material they're supposed to. And they couldn't do any parts of any jobs in which writing was involved because they never had to write. And within 6 months, they were fired. Students from all the colleges and all universities across this country would be fired because they couldn't do the job on myriad of levels, both in an academic sense, in learning the knowledge you're supposed to gain in colleges and universities, and yes, in high school as a basis for that. And also because there was an issue, a personal issue, quite frankly, with the attitudes of a lot of students that were coming into the workforce thinking they were owed something. It didn't take them long to get fired. And so you had all this paper on the wall and it signified nothing. All these degrees, all this and advanced degrees. I'm telling you, masters, PhDs. I personally saw lawyers rip new a-holes in the courtroom by judges because they knew all the legal framework of writing. And so they had the framework of writing of what they needed in the different things they were doing. Couldn't write a sentence. I saw this happen. And I saw lawyers ripped apart in front of the rest of the courtroom, in front of the district attorneys, in front of their clients, and in front of other people standing in line who had just come in from the jails. And it's pretty bad when somebody's wearing an orange jumpsuit who's smelling like ass because they came from the jails is tool on you because you can't write a sentence. That's pretty bad. So this actually had an effect on the actual workforce. So eventually, state by state, they try to figure it out. And yes, finally, yes, even Mississippi figured it out. And so they started asking implementation of more writing in all of these different courses. And so that's why, if you're someone who just came out of high school, you may have noticed you wrote more in the last 2 years than you had done in any of the prior, quite frankly, 11 years of your entire educational life. And it seemed to come out of nowhere, didn't it? Well, there's a reason. Because then we all finally told high schools, K through 12, hey, they need to learn writing because you can pass all these tests and get them in, get them out, and you get the money for it. And that's good for you. But then these students get to college. And now that we're trying to make sure that they actually learn something and the students can't hack it, instead of getting fired, what happened is they just flunked out. And so then that causes a chain reaction and a chain effect all the way down the line. So instead of, it used to be they just got fired when they got in the workforce. It was no longer their problem, no longer our problem, no longer the university's problems. Became the workforce problems, and a lot of people who spent a lot of money took out a lot of loans to get all these degrees, and they were pretty much worthless overnight. So all these things have been asked of all the way. Just we needed to rectify the situation. So then that leads us to what is and what has not been learned. One of the main issues that I'm seeing now is now I'm getting students who have actually written, so that's good news. So I see that they've got the framework stuff down, and most of you had the framework stuff down. But what are the issues that we're dealing with? Grammar, spelling, punctuation, usage. Why? Because most of that, and this is actually still even an unfortunateness of the high schools actually did teach this. When they were teaching it, it usually stopped at 8th grade. It was usually 9, 10, 11, and 12. It was literature-based. English was completely literature-based. And then only in the last couple of years have we started to writing about that literature that you may have learned. But all that framework stuff was last taught to you when you were 14 years old. And then, you remember, even if you're 18, do you remember things when you were 14? Well, imagine if you're even older than that. And it's assumed you know it. It's assumed you know it on every level, including this level. And I can only do so much even myself. So I can do more in a physical classroom because I can see the work as it's happening. I can work with them as it's going along and even after the fact. And in a particular class like this, generally, I would have had you do what's called a diagnostic. So you had a non-graded work That would have allowed me to see what were the areas in which you are struggling in when it comes to grammar, spelling, punctuation, which is the general areas. Now I do look for those other things in the other parts of the rubric. Proper thesis statement. And some of you had it and some of you didn't. Again, a reminder, you should have this because you should have read the chapter. The thesis statement is always the last sentence of the thesis paragraph. It is always the last sentence of the thesis paragraph, i.e. the last sentence of the first paragraph. The concluding statement is always the first sentence of the last paragraph, the concluding paragraph. So where that needs to be is where that needs to be. Now, you should have read the chapter because I did assign them to you. Some of you may have had an issue with the bookstore, and that wasn't your fault. We notified you through Canvas that they had something on the front page of Canvas, we as in the school itself, not me personally. But the school notified you to get your books the week before this class began because this prior week, we weren't going to be on campus at all. There was nobody on campus at all, not just us who were working from our homes, but nobody was. Because in general, the week of 4th of July, physical campus shuts down. And had we had physical classes, they actually wouldn't have started until today. The online ones started last week. So you were told to get it the week before, and some of you did. But what we were not notified of was the fact that the bookstore went through inventory last week, or sorry, 2 weeks ago. And therefore, some of you did notify me and say, hey, I went there, and they said they couldn't rent to me because they were in inventory. Well, that's on us, and we apologize for that. I didn't know, my boss didn't know. That's on the bookstore, quite frankly. We need to work together, particularly considering that we've had to convert everything to online from basically March the 16th until the middle of August. We need to be able to work around and make sure those things are there for you. So luckily, I was able to get, my boss was able to find me an online book that wasn't the one we had, but at least gives you the lessons. And that's what I posted on Canvas and the announcements tab last week. So you did have access to it, even if you don't have the textbook itself. But in that textbook with the lessons, whether it be the physical textbook or the online stuff I gave you, it tells you where the thesis statement is supposed to be. Now, not everybody had that mistake. That's not one of the big ones that was a big issue, but I do want to make sure that I'm abundantly clear on that. Now, one thing I did go over, and that some of you, for the most part, did well. It was rare that any of you went long on the essay as far as the individual paragraphs, so I'm happy about that, but some of you went short. Remember, every single paragraph of any composition needs to have at least 5 strong sentences and at least 4 full lines of text. I said that in the video last week. I'm going to say it again. On the long end, no more than 3/4 of a page, but nobody really had an issue with that when it came to the essay, though some of you did have that issue when it came to the journals. I think the issue there was you just forgot to split your paragraph up, because 2 strong, solid paragraphs, and that would have been perfectly fine. So as far as what I'm looking for, well, that was all in the lessons themselves that you should have read about as far as thesis paragraph and where things are placed and how they should be. In general, most of you were fine. If you lost some points, you lost maybe 4, maybe 8 points. General things you always need to remember. Yes, thesis statement's the last sentence of the thesis paragraph. Also, never write the words I believe or I think or in my opinion. I didn't really see that much of that, but I did see enough of it, so I want to note. Never write those words anywhere in an essay, and you sure should not do that in a thesis or paragraph. It's assumed to be what you believe, and it better be what you believe or what you think, or that it is in your opinion and all that other stuff. It's your essay. Writing that is cliche filler BS. So I only saw it in a little bit. So there were all these little things here and there, as far as, you know, not having a comma separating your introductory word, phrase, or clause from the rest of the sentence. That was an issue that I saw. Making sure that you have your comma before your coordinate conjunction. Any of the fanboys, that you have your comma before the fanboy, if it serves as a fanboy. And an or can either be a fanboy, coordinate conjunction, or it can also serve as a listing of 2 items, in which case you don't have the comma. If it's a listing of 3 or more items, then you have the comma before it anyways, because that's the actual comma. Didn't really see that many issues with that. So, but I do want to go over that part right there. Some of the words were misspelled, but not so much as you misspelled the word. It was more you used the wrong word that was not what it's supposed to be. So always understand what words you're supposed to use and how you're supposed to use them. And I go over those issues because those are the little things. The big things are, like I said before, the fatal errors. One I've already gone over, writing in the second person. It is impossible for the laws of nature and physics for an individual writing an essay to be in the second person, the lone exception to what I told you before. If a character involved, then they can be in the second person. And then if it's source material, the material itself and who wrote that material themselves can be in the second person. But the individual writing can never be, and therefore the word you, your, yours, or any form of you, your, yours, or any form of you should not appear anywhere in your essay unless it's for a legit reason to be in quote marks. Now, if you want to be a smart ass, just put the word you in quote marks. I'll just place zeros on your essay. So I have no problem doing that. But if it has a legit reason, like on this upcoming essay, you're writing a story. I'll get more into that a little later on. This is going to be a long video, just cover it now. Because of the issues that I saw, this is going to be a long video. So you just have to bear down. On this upcoming essay, if the speaker has dialogue and they're saying the word you, that's perfectly fine. But nowhere else in that essay should the word you appear. If one of the characters in one of the movies that is used in your comparative contrast analysis essay, whether it be the Gatsby movies or a different one, and I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. If they say the word you, that's fine. As long as it's in the quote marks, you're fine. When it comes to the argumentative, if the source material you use has the word you in it, that's perfectly fine so long as it's placed in the quote marks. But for no other reason should the word you appear anywhere in your essay. So that's one of the fatal errors. But there are a few other fatal errors that can be very harmful to your grade. A lot of you saw the word comma splice put under your comments. Some of you also saw the words run-on sentence or fused sentence as well. It's pretty much the same mistake, only done in a slightly different way. The run-on fused sentence is when you have a sentence to where you have multiple subjects and multiple predicates in the same sentence. You're not supposed to have that. What you have there should either be two completely separate sentences, or it can be merged, but you have to then make one of the parts of the sentence not complete, and therefore turn it from what's called an independent clause to a dependent clause. Or there is a way of correcting it and leaving it as is, but you have to utilize semicolons. And that works in both the run-on sentence and in the comma splice. The run-on sentence is when you have nothing there. You have a blank space there instead of either a semicolon, a period, and then capitalize the first word of the next sentence, or a comma and a coordinating conjunction, therefore turning the second part dependent. Comma splice is when you have a comma there separating two independent clauses, when you should either add the coordinating conjunction afterwards, therefore turn the second independent clause dependent, change that comma to a semicolon, and then make sure the first word afterwards is lowercase, because you can separate two independent clauses with a semicolon. In fact, that's what you should do. If you have two independent clauses, but you want them kept in the same sentence, you do that with a semicolon, not with a comma. You sure don't leave a blank space there. You can leave the comma there, add that coordinating conjunction, because then that coordinating conjunction would then turn the second independent clause dependent, or you put a period there, you capitalize the first word of the next sentence, and you make them two completely different sentences. If your sentence needs to be kept together that information needs to be kept together for a reason, the way you correct it is either add the coordinating conjunction after the comma, or the comma and the coordinating conjunction. That's your fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. I shouldn't have to tell you that, but unfortunately I've learned there's really nothing I cannot tell you because I don't know what the hell any of you learned. So that's one way of correcting it. Or like I said, you just make it, or if you want to keep it together, semicolon, because a semicolon is what is how you would link up two independent clauses if you want to keep them as one sentence. A lot of times the information you need needs to be kept together, and not usually the semicolon is the best way to go when it comes to that. But if the information doesn't need to be together, just make it two separate sentences. In punctuation at the end of the first independent clause, capitalize the first word of the second independent clause, have them as two completely different sentences, and you're perfectly good to go. So yes, the comma splice and the run-on sentence, also known as the fused sentence, are two fatal errors. Every time you have one of those, up to the first four of them, you lose 7 points every single time. The fifth time, you lose 4 points because that's all the rubric will allow me. The thing is, if you have any combination of those things, or the fourth of the fatal errors, by the way, which is not having a complete sentence, the biggest thing I've learned when it comes to that one, by the way, is the fact that not everyone knows what makes a complete sentence. Again, how did you get to college without knowing what's in a complete sentence? Well, you blame K through 12 on that. The main issue I've seen is that most of you know the first two parts, the subject and what I would call the predicate and what you would call the verb part of the sentence. Predicate verb is usually how I explain it in my classes. So the subject and the predicate verb, And most students do know those two parts, but there's one part that ends up missing: the completed thought. You must have a completed thought. Otherwise, you just leave your reader hanging. You can have a subject and a predicate verb, and it's not a sentence. In fact, most of the errors when people don't have complete sentences aren't because they're lacking a subject or a predicate verb, is that they do not have the completed thought and they don't have a sentence. They leave their reader hanging. You must complete the thought, complete what is there and what is needed to make it a sentence. If you don't, you have an incomplete sentence, and therefore that is also a fatal error. Again, for every one of those, and actually it's a combination. It's not just you have 4 comma splices or 4 run-on sentences or 4 incomplete sentences or 4 usage of the form verb you. It can be a combination of them. You can combine all 4 of them. You got 1 of each, and it equals the same, minus 28 points. And then the next time you have any of those fatals, or if you have just 4 regular errors, there's your other 4 points. 32 points are gone. The rubric saves you because it keeps you from losing any more points in that area. That's why some of you I noted, I just looked up to a certain point and then I stopped looking for that. There's no reason for me to look on because I cannot take any more points away from you. Or sometimes because I'm checking in other parts, I've checked the thesis paragraph and the concluding paragraph, and just looking at those 2 paragraphs between the fatals and the normal errors, you've lost all your available points there. I don't bother looking for that in the body. I look for other things, organizational structure, content, all those other things, but I don't look for those because I can't take any more points, so it's a waste of my time. I made sure to note that to you because just because I didn't note it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means at that point, I have no more points to take from you and I have other things I have to do. So what you need to do is check through the whole of the work that you have already done, the whole of the work that is already done, the essay you've already done. Correct the issues. If you have those fatal errors, correct it. If you wrote in the second person, put it in first or put it in third. Do not switch between first and third. That's not fatal, but it's bad on its own. Never lapse in the second person. My advice is stick to first. Although my advice would change once you get the argumentative, and I'll tell you more about that when we get there. But maintain first throughout or maintain third throughout. Never flip between the two and never, ever, ever go into second. Correct all your comma splices. If you have a subject and predicate on the one side and a completed thought on one side, you have a subject, predicate, completed thought on the other side. You want to keep it together? Semicolon. If you want to keep it together but can show difference or uniqueness or whatever through a coordinating conjunction, leave the comma or put the comma and then have your coordinating conjunction. If they don't need to be together, put a period, capitalize the first word, then the second independent clause, and make it 2 completely different sentences. And of course, make sure you have all the elements of sentence for every sentence. If you have an incomplete sentence, that's also fail. So make sure to look for all those, and then look for all the other issues, comma issues. If you have an introductory word, phrase, or clause, you have to set it off with a comma. I did see the listing of 3 or more items issues. It looks like y'all have the Oxford Harvard comma down, so good for that. That didn't seem to be an issue. The main issues I saw were not having, as far as the regular errors, was not having commas after introductory words, phrase, or clauses, not having clauses separating independent and dependent clauses, because if you separate independent and dependent clause, you have to use a comma. And then the other issue was using the wrong word or the wrong form of a word. I could kind of tell what you intended, but that's only because I've seen the errors so many times. I know what you intended. Watch out for that. And watch out in particular, because some of your issues might have been you spelled a word wrong and didn't get to realize it because spell check didn't catch it because it was another word spelled correctly. Do know this. If you, as I just said, if you spell a word incorrect in the way you wanted to use it, but correct in another form, spell check's not going to catch it. Do not be overly reliant on spell check because it won't catch that. And generally also be very hilarious, and they'll laugh, but then I'll mark off. I don't want to mark off. I'm cool with laughing, but the marking off usually means you're going down, you're downhill, and that's usually a bad sign. So check for all of these things. And have somebody else look at it. Have yourself look at it, but with a fresh brain. Some of you may have done the editing and proofreading, but because you did it at like late in the evening or early in the morning right before it was due, you just eyeball that and it looked great to you. For no other reason, you just want to be done with it. And you didn't really catch it. You might have caught a few little things here or there. But generally, you won't catch those things because, one, it looks like the greatest thing in the world. Why? Because your bed will never be more comfortable and you just want to be done with it. And 2, yeah, you're a little punch drunk at that point. You're loopy because you waited till the last minute to write and you're just trying to punch something out and throw it at me. Well, the grade reflects that sometimes. And then I can tell when you turn things in. It tells me when you turn things in. So note, what I'm about to tell you is only applying to those who actually turned in an essay. Those of you who did not turn an essay, don't do this. You have a 0. Don't beg or plead or cry or whatever BS you want to do. Don't bother. Your 0 stands. There were no academic integrity violations, so this applies to everybody else. If you did the essay and turned it in, you have the ability to redo this. I've opened a whole new box for the makeup example essay for you to turn in a revised, edited, and proofread essay of the one that you did. Now, note, it's the one you've already did. You cannot change the content of what you have there. Now, in general, most of you, the content was great, and all but one of you hit the word count of 700 words. Great for you. One of you didn't. You are allowed to add to what you have to make sure you get to that 700 words and more if you want. You are allowed to do that. And if some of the rest of you would like to add to what you have, that's also fine as well. But you can't just scrap what you already have. It has to be the same content, because I have to have some consistency between the first essay and the second to allow this redo. Also note, this is the only redo. Don't bother asking me to do another redo later. And that doesn't matter if it's one who's already done it or if it's one of you who didn't do it this time and said, well, do you allow them to do a redo? So I should be allowed to know. This is the only essay I do it for. And worst case, if you bring that up, I might just cancel everybody else's redos and then their old grades come back. And then, you get to be the a-hole who screwed everybody else out of a better grade. So yeah, it only applies to those of you who actually did the essay, who turned it in. It was in the box. I know you are because I have it in. It's locked. It's locked. It's locked. Don't bother asking about it. There's a new box for you to turn this new work in, although new old work. Just edit, revise, and proofread. The one of you needs to add to it. Add to it. The rest of you, all you need to do is edit, revise, and proofread. Clean it up. Content-wise, in general, y'all are pretty good. Even those of you who lost points in topic, a lot of the issues in topic, quite frankly, where it was such a mess in grammar, spelling, punctuation, and usage that it weakened your topic. It weakened whatever arguments you were putting forth, because that's what it can do. But you do have this ability. The box is open and will be open until 2:59 a.m. this Friday morning. Get it done before you go to bed Thursday night. Make sure you do all the cleaning up of what you need to do. You have from now until Thursday night to clean up what needs to be cleaned up. Get whatever help you can. If you have to ask somebody else to look at it for you, have them look at it for you. I know I'm repeating myself, but at this point I don't care, because I want you to get this. That's another thing I've learned. Not all of you are watching this video, so I might be talking to the wind. Well, your grade will reflect that. You have to watch these videos and you have to pay attention. And I don't care that it's going along right now. You have to pay attention, because if we were in a classroom, you'd be hearing me talk for 53 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes anyways. So pay attention here, pay attention there. You got to pay attention. And you have to watch these videos. And the information I give you through these videos, and all the information of when I do post things under announcements, that's on you. That is on you. And if you can't read that or can't watch what needs to be watched, then you really should not have taken an online course. I know you didn't really have that option because we had to go fully online anyways, but you probably should have waited until the fall, when we are going to offer physical courses in HyFlex realm, by the way. We'll offer a hybrid courses truly, which are basically physically show up twice and then have 1/3 of the class be online only, or pure online. But so I know you didn't have that option here, but sorry, we have to deal with what we have to deal with. COVID rules everything around us. Hell, my best friend, I just saw my best friend had it. So luckily she's okay, her family's okay, but it was rather concerning. But yeah, I'm going to afford you this ability, and this is the only time I'm going to afford you the entirety of this class, because we have to move on. I get to talk about anything that you have to do for the next essay or any of the work for this week. So what I'll probably do is stop this video and then do another video that'll detail that. But this is important. You need to get this. You need to learn it. You need to have it. And it needs to be done correctly, or else your grade's going to reflect it. And a 68, because I'd say most of the grades I had in this class were in the 60s, so a lot of Ds. There were some Fs, and there were some of you who didn't have all those mistakes. And I had As, great for you. Some Bs, great for you. But most of this class, it was in that 60, 64, 68. D's passing, D's are in degrees, I guess, as they say. But, and you don't want that on your GPA. You don't want that on your transcript. And to be honest, if you want to have anything to do with English language in future courses, they might not take a D. You might have to go back and do the class again and earn a C. So I'm affording this ability to correct it, and then also learn to not make the mistake in the first place, or correct it on your own before you turn it in to the Dropbox. Because again, this is the only time I'm affording you to do this. I will not do this on any other essays or any other work within this course, whether it be journals or full-fledged essays or your final exam essay. You won't have this opportunity. So take full advantage of this while you have it, but also know this is the only time you're going to be allowed to do this. So correct the issues as they were noted. I noted general issues that I saw in your comments box, but it's up to you to find the very specific things that were issues there. I'm not a cleanup service. Hell, I have even less of the ability to do a cleanup service for you now than I would have had we physically been in my office. And I only even offer it then if you were there the whole time. I don't offer it in the ability now because we just don't have even, the ability to do so. I could clean up every single one of your essays. You turn in, oh, I got great grades. And then eventually you don't have the instructor there who's willing to do that. And you have the ones that not. And then, oh, you didn't learn anything because you just took for granted that you had the grades that you had. And then you're working on your own. And then it's, So I gave you the general guidance, but it's going to be up to you to find the very specific things that I noted within. You and those around you, those who can help you, and whatever help you can get. But, and then my also advice is if you're not totally sure on something, reference your textbook, or if you weren't unable to get the textbook, well, now you can get it because the physical campus is open. Go get your textbook now. If you haven't already done it today or yesterday, get it now, and then go over those chapters on your own to note those issues, whether it be common issues, whether fatal errors. And they have a few more fatal errors they note in the textbooks than I give as fatal errors. I list usually 4. Sometimes textbooks note 6 or even up to 7. That's perfectly fine. You should be thankful I only do 4 because then that's 2 or 3 more options of me dropping more points out of you. So reference the textbook. Have somebody look at it. Have somebody else look at it. If you look at it, only do so with a fresh brain. Don't wait till late at night to look at it because your brain's dead by that point. You need to have at least a full night's sleep between when you write something and when you look at it yourself. So if you wait till the last minute, you have not done that for yourself. Usually what you do is you kind of eye scan it and boom, greatest thing ever written. Send it to me. 68. What? So do what you need to, but also note the issues that are there. I can only do so much for you from a computer screen from my house. Because even if I was able to do it fully from here, you wouldn't get it because the issues are deeper, quite frankly, than, again, these are things you should have learned years ago, if not over a decade ago or so. So get whatever help you can from wherever you can get it. Have as many eyeballs looking at that thing before you clean it. I mean, as you're cleaning it up, before you turn it in. If your own eyeballs look at it, have fresh eyeballs on it. If you're not sure what I'm referencing, even in certain cases, again, my apologies. K through 12 did an awful job on that. Look it up. Look up through your textbook. Look up through the internet. Have the curiosity you need to figure things out without having to beg and plead somebody else to just hand you the information, because the real world won't do that at all. It will not, and it will fire you if you ask it. I know a lot of people that's happened to. So now that I've gone on that 40-minute rant, I'm going to stop this video to then start another video to tell you what it is you'll be doing for your normal work for the next week. My apologies for the rant, but it has to be done, and I don't have time to waste. So, because believe it or not, you've got 3 more weeks left of this course. Again, there's benefits to a course like this. It's done in 4 weeks. There's bad things about a course like this. It's done in 4 weeks. You don't have time to waste, and we don't have time to, cleanest term I can use is lollygag. So I will stop this video now and then download it to the announcements tab, and then I will do another video about the work as far as next week. So I will stop this now and then start the next video.